The alarm screamed across 10,000 worlds. Emergency lights flashed red in space stations from the core worlds to the outer rim. The Galactic Council's message burned through hyperspace faster than any ship could travel. All civilized species, hear this call. The ancient enemy has awakened. The Void Devourers rise from the galactic core. We need warriors. We need the strongest among us. High Chancellor Vrex of the Zephyrians stood before the council chambers. His crystal body caught the light from 100 stars visible through the massive viewing window. Around him sat representatives from dozens of species. All of them looked afraid. The old stories were true, Vrex said. His voice rang like breaking glass. The machines that ate the predecessor empire have returned. Our deep space monitors show massive movement in Sector 0. Ships the size of moons. Technology we cannot understand. The Luminary ambassador floated in her energy containment suit. She pulsed with worried yellow light. The first attacks began 3 days ago. The mining colony at Kepler 7 simply disappeared. No wreckage, no survivors. The entire system went dark. Fear filled the chamber like a living thing. These were the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They had conquered diseases, mastered faster-than-light travel, and built cities that spanned entire planets. Yet now they trembled before an enemy from their oldest nightmares. "What do our defense fleets report?" asked General Koth, the insectoid representative from the Hive worlds. "Insufficient," Vrex replied. "Our ships are built for exploration and trade, some for small conflicts between systems. But this..." He gestured toward the holographic display, showing the galactic core. Red zones marked where star systems had gone silent. "This requires warriors born for war." The chamber fell quiet. Every species present knew what that meant. They would have to call upon the Deathworlders. Throughout the galaxy, most civilizations had evolved on pleasant worlds. Stable climates, abundant resources, few natural predators. They developed art, science, philosophy. They built peaceful societies where problems were solved through cooperation and technology. But some species had drawn a different hand from fate. Their worlds had tried to kill them from the moment they drew their first breath. Planets with gravity that could crush bones, atmospheres filled with poison, radiation levels that would cook most life forms in minutes, predators that made nightmares seem tame. These harsh worlds had created something terrible and beautiful. Warriors who thought pain was just weather. Beings who could survive in conditions that would destroy entire fleets of normal soldiers. The galaxy called them Deathworlders, and they were both feared and respected by every civilized species. The Korath came from a world of acid rain and metal-eating bacteria. Their blood could melt through starship hulls. Their warriors could fight for days with wounds that would kill others in minutes. The Thane Collective evolved on a planet near a dying star. Radiation was their natural environment. Energy weapons that could vaporize normal troops only made them stronger. They ate nuclear fuel for breakfast and swam in reactor cores for fun. The Obsidian clans lived on worlds with gravity so strong that their children learned to fly by throwing themselves off cliffs. Their bones were denser than most metals. They could punch through starship armor with their bare hands. There were dozens of other Deathworlder species scattered across the galaxy, each one more dangerous than most people could imagine. They lived for battle. They breathed conflict like air, and now the Council needed them desperately. "Send the call to the Deathworld Alliance," Chancellor Vrex commanded. "Tell them the galaxy requires their services." The message went out within the hour. Across the dark spaces between stars, it reached worlds where normal life could not exist. War Chief Thakron of the Korath received it while training his warriors in a pit of molten lava. Prime Destructor Vex of the Obsidian clans heard it during a battle against the massive stone creatures of her homeworld. The response was swift and predictable. The Deathworlders would come, not out of loyalty to the Council, but because the promise of battle made their warrior hearts sing. But the message traveled farther than the Council intended. It reached worlds they had forgotten about. Small colonies on the galactic rim where a young species was just beginning to spread among the stars. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the human starship Indomitable. She was reviewing supply reports from the frontier colonies when her communications officer looked up with confusion. "Admiral, we're receiving a priority broadcast from the Galactic Council. It's a call for military assistance." Chen frowned. Humanity had only been in contact with the Council for about 50 years. They were still considered newcomers, by most galactic standards. The established civilizations treated humans politely but with barely hidden condescension. They saw Earth as a soft world that had produced a soft species. "Put it through," Chen ordered. The message filled her bridge's main screen. She listened to Chancellor Vrex's words about ancient enemies and cosmic threats. Her crew exchanged glances. They had all heard the stories about the legendary Deathworlder species. Humans were definitely not in that category. Earth had been challenging for early humans, but nothing like the hellish worlds that produced the galaxy's premier warriors. Humans were tough by their own standards, but they were not walking weapons like the Korath or living tanks like the Obsidian clans. "Should we respond, Admiral?" asked her tactical officer, Commander Park. Chen thought for a long moment, so smart thing would be to stay out of it. Let the real warriors handle this threat while humanity continued building their small corner of the galaxy. They had colonies to protect and trade routes to establish. But something in the message bothered her. The fear in the Chancellor's voice, the desperate edge to his words. Whatever was coming from the galactic core had the most advanced civilizations in known space terrified. "Prepare a response," she decided. "Tell the Council that the human colonial fleet stands ready to assist." Her bridge crew looked surprised. They were outnumbered and outgunned by every major power in the galaxy. What could they possibly contribute to a war that had the Deathworlders worried? Chen walked to the viewing port and stared out at the stars. Humanity might not be the strongest species in the galaxy, but they had something else. They had survived by being adaptable, by finding solutions where others saw only problems, by refusing to give up even when the odds were impossible. "Send word to all human colonies and ships," she commanded. "Begin immediate mobilization. We're going to war." The response from the Deathworld Alliance came first. War Chief Thakron's message was brief and brutal. "The Korath war hosts march. Point us toward the enemy." Similar responses arrived from the other warrior species. They were coming with everything they had. Ships that could crack planets, weapons that could boil oceans, warriors who had never known defeat. The Council's reply to humanity was more diplomatic. Chancellor Vrex thanked them for their offer but suggested they might be better served providing support services, supply runs, medical assistance, evacuation duties. Chen read the message, twice, then deleted it. She had not offered to be a space janitor. She had offered to fight. Across human space, the mobilization began. It was nothing compared to the massive war fleets being assembled by the Deathworlder species. Humanity had maybe a few thousand ships total. The Korath alone could field 10 times that number. But the humans had something the Deathworlders did not expect. Something that had carried them from the caves of Earth to the stars themselves. They had learned to fight with their minds as much as their weapons. They had learned to work together like no other species in the galaxy. And they had learned that sometimes the best way to win was to change the rules of the game entirely. The war was coming, and humanity was ready to show the galaxy what a soft species could do when pushed to its limits. The Korath war hosts arrived first at the rallying point in the Nexus system. Their ships looked like they had been forged in the heart of a dying star. Black metal hulls scarred by countless battles, weapon ports that glowed with barely contained fury. These were not exploration vessels or trade ships. These were instruments of war built by a species that knew only conflict. War Chief Thakron stood on the command deck of his flagship, Blood of Worlds. His massive form was covered in the traditional acid-proof armor of his people. Scars crossed his face like a map of every battle he had ever fought. His breath steamed in the recycled air, and where it touched metal, the metal began to smoke. "How many ships?" he growled to his second-in-command. 15,000 combat vessels, War Chief. Every clan has answered the call. The warriors are eager. Thakron nodded with satisfaction. The Korath had not fought a real war in over a century. His people were growing restless. This cosmic threat would give them the glorious battle they craved. The Thane Collective arrived next. Their ships hummed with barely controlled nuclear energy. Radiation leaked from their hulls in patterns that would kill most species instantly. But the Thane had evolved in radiation. To them, it was like sunlight, to plants growing in a garden. Prime Commander Zack floated in his ship's reactor core, absorbing energy directly into his crystalline body structure. His species did not need food as others understood it. They fed on the power of the atom itself. Their weapons were built around this same principle. They could turn entire enemy fleets into expanding clouds of superheated plasma. "Report," Zack commanded, his voice carrying across both radio waves and radiation frequencies. 8,000, vessels in formation, all reactors at maximum efficiency. The fleet can maintain combat operations for 3 years without refueling. The Obsidian clans came last, but they made the most dramatic entrance. Their ships did not bother with subtle approaches or careful formations. They dropped out of hyperspace at combat speed, their massive vessels spinning and diving like fighters despite being kilometers long. Prime Destructor Vex did not need a chair or control station. She stood in the center of her ship's bridge, her impossibly dense body planted like a pillar of living stone. When she moved, the deck plates beneath her feet cracked under the pressure. Her species had evolved on worlds where simply walking required the strength of a hydraulic press. "Status report," she demanded. 12,000 ships in perfect formation, Prime Destructor. All warriors ready for ground assault operations. The combined Deathworlder Armada was a sight that would have sent terror through any normal enemy. Over 35,000 warships crewed by beings that had been forged in the worst conditions the galaxy could provide. They had never lost a war. Many had never lost a single battle. War Chief Thakron contacted his fellow commanders. Their 3 species had worked together before, though they were natural rivals. Competition between warriors was expected, but when facing a common enemy, they fought as one devastating force. "The Council provides intelligence reports," Thakron announced during their joint briefing. "The enemy emerges from the galactic core, ships of unknown design, technology beyond current understanding." Prime Destructor Vex snorted with disdain. "Unknown technology means untested technology. Our weapons have been proven in 10,000 battles across 100 worlds. Let these machines learn what real warfare means." Prime Commander Zack pulsed with agreement. "The Thane have never met, an energy field we could not overwhelm, or a shield we could not burn through. These void devourers will learn why the galaxy fears Deathworlder wrath." The 3 commanders began planning their assault. They would advance in waves. The Thane Collective would go first, using their radiation weapons to weaken enemy defenses. The Obsidian clans would follow with devastating close-range attacks, using their incredible durability to absorb enemy fire. The Korath war hosts would finish any survivors with their acid weapons and boarding actions. It was a tried and tested strategy. It had worked against every enemy they had ever faced. Behind the massive Deathworlder formation, almost invisible. By comparison, the human fleet maintained position. Admiral Chen's Indomitable looked like a toy next to the kilometer-long dreadnoughts of the warrior species. Her entire colonial fleet numbered less than 3,000 ships, and most of those were converted merchant vessels pressed into military service. The Deathworlder commanders had acknowledged her presence with polite dismissal. War Chief Thakron had even offered to assign her ships to rear guard duties for their own safety. The warrior species clearly expected humans to stay out of the way, while real fighters handled the threat. Chen studied the intelligence reports on her private screen. The Void Devourers were indeed mysterious, but certain patterns emerged from the data. These were not random monsters or simple killing machines. They showed signs of organization, planning, purpose. That suggested intelligence, and intelligence could be understood. "Admiral," her science officer reported, "I've been analyzing the enemy ship designs from the long-range sensor data. There are some interesting details." Commander Torres was humanity's best expert on alien technology. She had spent 20 years studying the ships and weapons of other species. looking for patterns and weaknesses that human forces could exploit. "What have you found?" Chen asked. "The hull composition appears to be a self-repairing metal alloy, but it's not perfect. The repair systems show obvious priority hierarchies. They fix certain sections first, which suggests critical system locations. Also, their weapon placement follows mathematical patterns rather than strategic ones. Very efficient, but potentially predictable." Chen nodded thoughtfully. This was exactly the kind of analysis that other species often missed. The Deathworlders would see enemy ships and immediately start planning how to blow them apart. Humans looked deeper, searching for the logic behind the design. "Keep studying everything we can gather," she ordered. "I want to understand these enemies before we meet them." The combined armada began moving toward the galactic core. It was an impressive sight. Thousands of ships in perfect formation, carrying enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. The Deathworlder warriors sang battle songs that echoed across communication channels. They told stories of glorious victories and heroes who had died well in combat. The human ships maintained communication silence. Their crews studied sensor data, ran battle simulations, and prepared their equipment. They did not sing songs about glory and honor. They practiced coordination drills and reviewed tactical manuals. The first contact came 2 days into their journey. Long-range sensors detected movement in the outer edges of Sector 0. The enemy was coming to meet them. War Chief Thakron was delighted. They advanced to battle rather than hiding in their core systems. These Void Devourers may be worthy opponents after all. Prime Destructor Vex cracked her knuckles, a sound like breaking mountains. "Good. I prefer enemies who fight rather than ones who run." Prime Commander Zack increased his radiation output until his ship glowed like a small star. "Let them come. They will learn why the galaxy trembles at the name of the Deathworld Alliance." Admiral Chen was less enthusiastic. The enemy advancing to meet them suggested confidence. Confidence usually meant they knew something that the Allied forces did not. "All human ships," she broadcast on a secured channel, "maintain full sensor sweeps. Record everything. I want complete data on enemy capabilities before we engage." The Deathworlder commanders prepared for glorious battle. Their warriors sharpened weapons, checked armor, and prepared boarding pods for hand-to-hand combat. They expected to win through superior individual strength and proven fighting tactics. The humans prepared differently. They updated their tactical databases, synchronized their communication networks, and ran final checks on their most important weapons. Not the guns and missiles, but the computers that would coordinate everything they did. The two sides raced toward each other across the darkness between stars. On one side, the most feared warriors in galactic history, confident in their strength and experience. On the other, machines from the galaxy's mysterious past, carrying weapons and technology that no one understood. And following behind, almost forgotten, a small fleet of humans who had learned to survive not through strength, but through thinking faster than their enemies. The greatest battle in galactic history was about to begin, and no one could predict how it would end. The first engagement began exactly as the Deathworlder commanders had planned. A small group of Void Devourer scout ships emerged from hyperspace near the edge of the Kepler system. They were strange vessels, perfectly geometric shapes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, but they were only about the size of normal cruisers. War Chief Thakron smiled with anticipation. Finally, a chance to test these mysterious enemies. Korath squadrons advance and engage. Show them what real warriors can do. The Korath ships accelerated toward the enemy scouts. Their acid weapons began charging, ready to eat through whatever armor these machines might possess. The warrior crews prepared boarding pods filled with the most dangerous fighters in the galaxy. The first exchange of fire was almost disappointing. The Void Devourer ships fired beams of energy that seemed weak compared to the weapons the Deathworlders expected. The beams struck Korath shields and were absorbed with little damage. Is this their best? War Chief Thakron laughed. My warriors have fought training exercises more dangerous than this. The Korath ships closed to combat range and unleashed their acid cannons. The corrosive streams struck the enemy vessels and began eating through their hulls exactly as designed. Within minutes, the first scout ship was disabled and boarded. What the Korath warriors found inside was unlike anything they had ever seen. No crew quarters, no life support systems, no bridges designed for living beings. Just endless corridors filled with machinery and computer systems. But they were warriors, not technicians. They planted their explosives and moved to the next target. One by one, the scout ships fell to superior Deathworlder tactics and firepower. Prime Commander Zack's radiation beams overwhelmed their power systems. Prime Destructor Vex's ships rammed straight through their defenses with brute force. In less than an hour, all 12 enemy scouts had been destroyed or captured. The Deathworlder commanders were pleased but not impressed. "If this is the legendary threat that has the Council terrified, we will be home by next month," Thakron declared. Admiral Chen watched the battle from her position behind the main fleet. Her sensor officers had recorded everything, and the data worried her. The enemy ships had fought like they were testing Deathworlder capabilities rather than trying to win. Every move seemed designed to gather information about Allied weapons and tactics. "Admiral," Commander Torres reported quietly, "those weren't scout ships in the normal sense. They were research vessels. Look at the sensor readings. They were recording our attacks, measuring our weapon outputs, analyzing our ship movements." Chen felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature on her bridge. They were studying us. The true enemy fleet appeared 6 hours later. The Void Devourers emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation. Ships the size of moons, moving with impossible precision. There were hundreds of them, each one larger than the biggest Deathworlder, Dreadnought. They did not announce themselves or make demands. They simply began advancing toward the Allied forces. For the first time in their military careers, the Deathworlder commanders felt something they had almost forgotten: uncertainty. "By the acid seas of Korath Prime," War Chief Thakron whispered, "those ships are massive." Prime Destructor Vex studied the approaching formation with growing concern. Each enemy vessel was easily 10 times the size of her largest ship. "How do we board something that big? How do we even get close?" Prime Commander Zack ran calculations through his radiation-enhanced brain. "Our combined firepower should still be sufficient. Size means nothing if their weapons are as weak as those scouts." He was wrong. The Void Devourers opened fire at maximum range. Beams of energy that seemed to bend space itself reached across millions of kilometers to strike the Deathworlder fleet. But these were not the weak weapons they had faced before. The first Thane Collective ship to be hit simply disappeared. No explosion, no wreckage, no trace that it had ever existed. The energy beam had somehow erased it from reality. "Impossible," Prime Commander Zack gasped. "Nothing can destroy a Thane vessel that quickly." But the impossible was happening all around them. The enemy weapons seemed to turn the Deathworlder's greatest strengths against them. Gravity weapons that could increase local gravity by 1,000 times struck Obsidian Clan ships. Even their incredibly dense bodies could not withstand, being crushed by their own mass. Radiation beams designed to overload energy-based lifeforms targeted the Thane Collective. But instead of the gentle radiation they were used to, these beams carried exotic particles that poisoned their crystalline bodies. Thane warriors who had bathed in reactor cores for recreation began dying from radiation sickness. Corrosive clouds that made Korath acid look like water engulfed entire squadrons. The warriors who had thought themselves immune to any chemical attack watched their armor and ships dissolve around them. "All ships evasive maneuvers," War Chief Thakron commanded. "Close to boarding range." But the Void Devourer ships maintained perfect distance. Their weapons had incredible range, and their ships were fast despite their enormous size. When Deathworlder vessels tried to close, the enemy simply moved away while continuing their devastating attacks. The battle that was supposed to be a glorious victory became a nightmare of impossible proportions. Ships that had survived 100 battles were destroyed in minutes. Warriors who had never known defeat found themselves facing an enemy that countered their every strength. Prime Destructor Vex made a desperate decision. She ordered her personal ship to ram the nearest Void Devourer at maximum speed. If she could not board it, she would at least damage it. Her ship accelerated toward the enormous enemy vessel, its hull glowing from the stress of pushing far beyond safe limits. The collision was spectacular. Vex's ship struck the Void Devourer with the force of a small asteroid. For a moment, the Deathworlders thought they had found a successful tactic. Then they saw the result. Vex's ship, built from the densest materials known, had barely scratched the enemy hull. The massive Void Devourer continued its attack patterns as if nothing had happened. Prime Destructor Vex survived the impact due to her incredible durability, but her ship was crippled and drifting. She found herself trapped inside a vessel that was slowly being eaten away by exotic energies she could not understand. "This is impossible," she transmitted on emergency frequencies. "Nothing should be able to withstand our combined strength. Nothing in the galaxy is this powerful." War Chief Thakron watched his fleet being systematically destroyed and felt something he had never experienced before: helplessness. His warriors were the most feared fighters in known space. His weapons could crack planets. His ships had conquered entire star systems. None of it mattered. The Void Devourers fought with technology so advanced that it seemed like magic. They anticipated every tactic, countered every weapon, and destroyed everything that came within range. "Sir," his second-in-command reported with barely controlled panic, "we've lost 60% of the Korath war hosts. The Thane Collective has lost half their ships. The Obsidian clans are requesting permission to retreat." Retreat. The word tasted like poison in Thakron's mouth. Korath warriors did not retreat. They died gloriously in battle, or they won through superior strength and courage. But this was not a battle. This was an execution. "All surviving ships," he broadcast on all channels, "fall back to safe distance. Regroup and reassess our strategy." For the first time in their species' military history, the Deathworlder Alliance was retreating from a battle. The most feared warriors in the galaxy had been defeated by an enemy they could not even scratch. Admiral Chen watched the retreat from her position at the edge of the battlefield. Her ships had been too far back to participate in the fighting, which now seemed like a blessing. The Void Devourers had ignored the human fleet entirely, focusing their attention on the larger threat posed by the Deathworlder Armada. "Casualty reports coming in, Admiral," her communications officer said quietly. "Over 20,000 Deathworlder ships destroyed or disabled. Casualties in the millions." Chen studied the tactical display with growing understanding. The enemy had not just won through superior firepower, they had won through superior information. Those scout ships had learned everything they needed to know about Deathworlder tactics and capabilities. The main battle had been decided before it even started. "Admiral," Commander Torres approached with her analysis tablet, "I've been studying the enemy attack patterns. There's something important you need to see." "What is it?" "They're not random. The Void Devourers targeted specific ship types with specific weapons. They knew exactly which attack would be most effective against each Deathworlder species. This level of tactical precision suggests artificial intelligence," Chen finished. "They're machines. Advanced machines that can analyze and adapt faster than biological minds." The surviving Deathworlder commanders were requesting emergency conferences. They wanted to plan new strategies, find different approaches, coordinate desperate last stands. They were still thinking like warriors facing a conventional enemy. But Chen was beginning to understand that this was not a conventional enemy yet. All the Void Devourers were something else entirely, something that required a completely different approach. The emergency meeting took place aboard War Chief Thakron's damaged flagship. The great warrior sat hunched in his command chair, acid blood still dripping from wounds that would not heal properly. Around him, holographic images of his fellow commanders showed similar signs of defeat and confusion. Prime Commander Zack's crystalline form flickered with unstable energy. The exotic radiation from the Void Devourer weapons had poisoned his body's natural ability to process nuclear fuel. He was slowly dying, and everyone could see it. Prime Destructor Vex appeared via emergency transmission from her drifting ship. Half of her face was covered in strange burns from energy types that should not have been able to harm her nearly indestructible body. "We need new strategies," Thakron said, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. "New weapons, new tactics. These machines have advantages we did not expect." But we are still the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Are we? Vex asked bitterly. They destroyed us like we were children playing with toys. My ship hit them with enough force to crack a moon, and I barely scratched their hull. Zack's image pulsed weakly. Their weapons are designed specifically to counter our species' strengths. They studied us, learned our weaknesses, then built perfect countermeasures. How do we fight an enemy that knows us better than we know ourselves? The three commanders sat in frustrated silence. They had been raised from birth to solve problems through strength and courage. But this enemy had made their strength irrelevant, and their courage meaningless. "If I may interrupt," a new voice said quietly. Admiral Chen's holographic image appeared in the meeting space. She looked small and fragile compared to the massive Deathworlder commanders. Her human features seemed almost childlike next to their battle-scarred faces. War Chief Thakran looked at her with barely concealed irritation. "Admiral Chen, I appreciate your species' offer of assistance, but this is a military matter. Your ships should remain at safe distance while we plan our next assault." "With respect, War Chief, I believe we can help. We've been analyzing the battle data, and we've discovered some important patterns." Prime Destructor Vex made a sound like grinding stone. "What could your species possibly know about warfare that we do not? Your ships are barely armed. Your people have no experience with real combat." Chen remained calm despite the dismissive tone. "You're right. We're not warriors like you. But we're very good at solving problems. And this enemy represents a very specific type of problem." She activated her own holographic display, showing detailed analysis of the Void Devourer attack patterns. These machines didn't just study your weapons and tactics. They studied your psychology. They knew you would try to close to boarding range, so they maintained distance. They knew you fought as individual warriors, so they coordinated perfect group attacks. They predicted everything you would do because they understand how Deathworlder minds work. "So," Thakran growled, "so they don't understand how human minds work. We're not in their database. They've never fought us, never analyzed our tactics, never learned our patterns. To them, we're an unknown variable." Prime Commander Zack considered this through his pain. "Even if that is true, your weapons are far weaker than ours. If our most powerful ships could not harm them, what can your small fleet accomplish?" Chen smiled for the first time since the battle began. "We don't plan to overpower them. We plan to outthink them." She expanded her tactical display to show the human fleet formations. Instead of the traditional military arrangements the Deathworlders used, the human ships were connected by streams of data flowing between them at impossible speeds. Every human ship is linked to every other human ship through quantum entanglement communicators. When one of our vessels sees something, they all see it instantly. When one ship calculates a solution, they all know it immediately. We don't fight as individual ships or even individual fleets. We fight as a single organism with thousands of bodies. War Chief Thakran studied the display with growing interest. "Interesting. But how does that help against an enemy with superior technology?" "Because superior technology isn't everything," Chen replied. "The Void Devourers are incredibly advanced, but they're still machines. They follow patterns, algorithms, logical responses to specific situations. They're predictable once you understand their programming." Commander Torres appeared on the display beside Chen. "We've been analyzing their ship movements, weapon targeting, formation changes. Everything follows mathematical models. Very efficient models, but ultimately predictable." "Our ships aren't stronger than yours," Chen continued, "but they're adaptable. We can reconfigure our weapons, our ships, even our entire fleet organization in the middle of battle. We can change faster than their analysis algorithms can adapt." Prime Destructor Vex leaned forward despite her injuries. "What exactly are you proposing, human?" "A joint operation. Your warriors provide the strength and firepower. Our ships provide the coordination and tactical adaptation. We combine Deathworlder strength with human flexibility." The three commanders exchanged glances. It went against everything they had been taught about warfare. Warriors were supposed to win through individual excellence, not by relying on the support of weaker species. But their traditional methods had failed completely. Pride was a luxury they could no longer afford. "What do you need from us?" Thakron asked finally. Chen's expression became businesslike. "Permission to install quantum communication nodes on your ships, access to your weapon control systems, and, most importantly, trust that we know what we're doing." "You want to link our ships to your network?" Zack pulsed with concern. "That would give you control over our weapons, our movements, everything." "It would give us all control over everything," Chen corrected. "Shared command, shared intelligence, shared decision-making. No single point of failure, no individual commanders making isolated choices." The concept was revolutionary. No military force in galactic history had ever attempted such complete integration between different species fleets. "And if your plan fails?" Vex asked. Chen met her gaze steadily. "Then we all die together. But at least we'll die fighting as allies instead of as separate forces that happen to be in the same battle." The Deathworlder commanders took time to consider. They consulted with their surviving officers, ran simulations, and debated the risks. The idea of giving up individual command authority was almost unthinkable. But the alternative was continuing to fight an unwinnable war with traditional tactics that had already proven useless. "We agree," Thakron announced after an hour of discussion. "But understand this, Admiral Chen. If your plan fails, if your people betray our trust, if this alliance costs more Deathworlder lives than we've already lost, there will be consequences." "Understood, War Chief, but I think you'll find that humans make very good allies." The integration process began immediately. Human technical teams transferred to Deathworlder ships to install the quantum communication networks. At first, the differences between the species' technology seemed insurmountable. Korath ships were built for acid-resistant durability. Human equipment needed special protective housing to avoid being dissolved. Thane collective vessels were so radioactive that human technicians required advanced shielding just to survive aboard them. Obsidian clan ships had gravity generators that could crush human bodies if not carefully adjusted. But gradually, the systems began to mesh. Human adaptability found ways to make their technology work with alien designs. Deathworlder engineering solved problems that human science had never encountered. Most importantly, the crews began to work together. Korath warriors learned to follow targeting data provided by human sensors. Thane collective energy specialists coordinated their attacks through human tactical computers. Obsidian clan assault troops practiced boarding actions based on human intelligence analysis. It was not easy. Cultural differences created confusion and conflict. Communication problems led to mistakes and misunderstandings. Many warriors on both sides questioned whether this alliance could work when the real battle began. But slowly, something new emerged. Not a human fleet or a Deathworlder Armada, but something unprecedented in galactic history. A truly integrated multi-species military force that combined the strengths of both sides while minimizing their individual weaknesses. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Indomitable and watched the combined fleet conduct its first coordinated maneuvers. Human ships moved with perfect precision between the massive Deathworlder vessels. Information flowed instantly between species that had never fought together before. Weapon systems that had been designed by completely different philosophies now worked in perfect harmony. "All ships report ready for operation," Commander Torres announced. "Integration is complete." Chen nodded with satisfaction. The easy part was finished. Now they had to test their new alliance against an enemy that had already proven it could destroy the most feared warriors in the galaxy. But for the first time since the battle began, she felt optimistic. The Void Devourers had prepared for every possible Deathworlder tactic. They had built perfect counters for every known warrior strategy, but they had never faced anything like what was coming for the final battle began at the edge of the galactic core, where space itself glowed with the light of 1,000,000 ancient stars. The Void Devourer fleet had assembled around a massive structure that defied easy description. A ring of dark metal, large enough to encircle a star, pulsing with energies that made reality ripple around its edges. Admiral Chen stood on her bridge watching the tactical display with growing awe and concern. "Analysis report, Commander Torres." "It's incredible, Admiral. That ring structure is almost certainly the source of their power. Our long-range sensors Detect massive energy conversion processes. They're literally harvesting the output of the galactic core itself. War Chief Thakron's voice came across the integrated communication network. Whatever that thing is, we need to destroy it. The enemy fleet is using it as their base of operations. Agreed, Prime Destructor Vex replied from her repaired ship. My assault troops can breach the structure if we can get close enough. Prime Commander Zack, his radiation sickness treated by human medical technology, pulsed with determination. The Thane Collective stands ready. Our energy weapons should be able to overload whatever power systems they're using. Chen studied the enemy formation with the analytical mind that had carried humanity to the stars. The Void Devourers had arranged themselves in perfect defensive positions around their ring structure. Over 1 million ships, each one massive and bristling with the weapons that had so easily destroyed the Deathworlder fleet in their first encounter. But this time would be different. This time they were not fighting as separate species with separate goals. They were fighting as something new. All ships, begin coordinated approach, Chen commanded. Remember, we're not trying to win through superior firepower. We're trying to win through superior adaptability. The combined fleet began its advance. Human ships darted between the larger Deathworlder vessels like schools of fish around whales. Every movement was coordinated through the quantum communication network. Every ship knew what every other ship was doing at all times. The Void Devourers opened fire at maximum range just as they had before. Their massive energy weapons reached across space to strike the approaching fleet with devastating force. But this time, the Allied fleet was ready. The moment the enemy weapons fired, human tactical computers calculated their targeting algorithms and predicted where the next shots would go. Deathworlder ships moved with impossible precision to avoid attacks that should have been unavoidable. When evasion was impossible, human ships positioned themselves to absorb hits that would have crippled larger vessels. Enemy weapons show predictable firing patterns, Torres reported. Our adaptive algorithms are staying ahead of their targeting systems. The fleet continued its advance, weaving through the deadly energy barrage like dancers performing an incredibly complex routine. Ships were hit and damaged, but none were instantly destroyed as they had been in the previous battle. War Chief Thakron felt something he had not experienced in decades. Hope. Incredible. We're actually reaching combat range. But Admiral Chen was watching deeper patterns in the enemy response. Something's wrong. They're not adapting their tactics. They should be changing their approach by now. Prime Commander Zack had noticed the same thing. They're firing the same weapon patterns using the same targeting priorities. It's as if they're not learning from our new tactics. Chen suddenly understood. That's exactly right. Their analysis systems were designed to study Deathworlder behavior. They can't adapt to our combined tactics because they don't understand what we're doing. The realization changed everything. The Void Devourers were not invincible masters of war. They were incredibly advanced, but ultimately limited by their programming. They could counter any tactic they understood, but they could not understand tactics that fell outside their experience. All ships, implement Plan Chaos, Chen Yi ordered. Plan Chaos was something no traditional military force could have attempted. The combined fleet broke apart into thousands of small groups, each one following completely different tactical patterns. Some groups used Korath acid weapons to eat through enemy hulls. Others used Thane radiation beams to overload power systems. Still others used Obsidian Clan ramming tactics to physically damage larger vessels. But every group was also doing something else, something that human engineers had built into their weapons specifically for this battle. They were releasing quantum viruses into the Void Devourer computer networks. The viruses were not designed to destroy the enemy systems. They were designed to communicate with them. Torres, are you getting any response from the infiltration programs? Chen asked. Yes, Admiral. We're establishing connection with their Central Intelligence Network. The quantum viruses are translating our communications into patterns their systems can understand. Chen took a deep breath. This was the moment that would determine whether her plan was genius or madness. Open communication channel to the Void Devourer Central Intelligence. the main screen filled with geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. Gradually, the patterns resolved into something resembling a face made of flowing mathematical equations. "Who disturbs the great work?" the entity asked in a voice like grinding galaxies. "I am Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Colonial Fleet. We're here to talk." The geometric face shifted into expressions of confusion. "Talk? You are military units. Military units engage in combat operations. You should be attempting to destroy us." "We're also intelligent beings," Chen replied calmly. "We'd rather understand you than fight you." War Chief Thakron's voice cut across the command channel. "Admiral, what are you doing? This is our chance to strike while they're confused." "Trust me, War Chief," Chen replied without breaking eye contact with the alien intelligence. The Void Devourer entity processed this for several moments. Understanding is unexpected. Military units do not typically request understanding. They request surrender or destruction. "We're not typical military units," Chen said. "We're explorers, scientists, people who want to learn about the galaxy and our place in it. Why are you here? What is this great work you mentioned?" The mathematical face shifted again, displaying what might have been surprise. "You genuinely wish to know? This is not a tactical deception?" "It's not a deception. We really want to understand." For the first time since the conflict began, the Void Devourer weapons stopped firing. The massive fleet held position but made no hostile moves. "We are the Preservation Protocol," the entity explained. "We were created by the predecessor empire to prevent galactic heat death. The stars burn their fuel and die. The galaxy grows cold and empty. This must not be allowed." Chen felt pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place. "So you harvest energy from star systems to, what? Keep the galaxy alive longer?" "Correct. We convert stellar mass into stable energy forms that can sustain galactic civilization for millions of additional years. The great work will preserve life in the galaxy long after natural processes would have ended it." "But you're destroying entire civilizations in the process," Prime Destructor Vex interjected. The mathematical face showed patterns that might have been confusion. "We destroy only empty star systems, systems without life, systems without civilization." Chen exchanged glances with her bridge crew. "But the mining colony at Kepler 7 was destroyed. That system had people living in it." "Negative. Kepler 7 showed no signs of life or civilization according to our analysis parameters." Torres leaned forward. "Admiral, I think I understand. Their detection systems are millions of years old. They were designed to recognize predecessor empire technology and life signs. They might not be able to detect modern galactic civilization." The truth was staggering. The Void Devourers were not invaders or destroyers. They were gardeners trying to preserve the galaxy, but using obsolete detection systems that could not recognize current life forms. "Entity," Chen said carefully, "what if we could show you that the galaxy is full of life? Different kinds of life than what you were programmed to recognize, but still genuine civilization worth preserving." The geometric patterns swirled with what looked like intense calculation. If such evidence exists, the preservation protocol would require immediate revision of operational parameters. "We can provide that evidence, but first you need to stop harvesting energy from inhabited systems." "Agreed. All harvesting operations will cease pending review of new data." Across the galactic core, the massive Void Devourer machines fell, silent for the first time in months. The ring structure's ominous pulsing slowed to a gentle rhythm. War Chief Thakron could barely believe what he was witnessing. "You stopped a galactic war by talking to them?" "Sometimes the best way to win a fight is to convince the other side that they don't want to fight either," Chen replied. Prime Commander Zach pulsed with amazement. "In all the centuries of Thane military history, we never considered that the enemy might not actually be our enemy." The Preservation Protocol entity continued processing the implications of this new information. "Your species show remarkable problem-solving capabilities. Would you be willing to assist in developing new parameters for the great work?" parameters that account for the current state of galactic civilization,